Good evening, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. I'm really honored and excited to be here tonight with Brandon Hobson celebrating his new book, The Removed, in conversation with Georgia activist and Charis longtime friend, Holiday Simmons. I'm going to introduce them both a little bit more, but I just want to say welcome to everybody wherever you're watching from. If you'd like to shout us out in the chat and let us know where you're viewing the event from, we love to see that. You can also at any point in time click this Ask a Question button down in the bottom center of your screen and put a question in for Brandon or for Holiday. So I'll start with Holiday, our interviewer. Holiday Simmons is the founder and lead practitioner of Southern Soul Wellness, a holistic mental health and spiritual wellness practice for the liberation of mind, body, community, and planet Earth. He is also the director of healing and resilience at the Campaign for Southern Equality and is a consultant with Black Emotional and Mental Health, BEAM. Holiday is a Black Cherokee transmasculine earth bottom that makes his home in Atlanta, Georgia, and finds beauty in soccer, the earth, and hugging moments of liberation. So welcome, Holiday. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
And we're here tonight to celebrate the work of Brandon Hobson. Brandon is the author of Where the Dead Sit Talking, which was a finalist for the 2018 National Book Award for Fiction and winner of the Reading the West Book Award. His other books include Desolation of Avenues Untold and the novella Deep Ellum. His work has appeared in the Pushcart Prize anthology, The Believer, the Paris Review Daily, Conjunctions, Noon, and McSweeney's, among other places. He is an assistant professor of creative writing at New Mexico State University and teaches in the MFA program at the Institute of American Indian Arts. Hobson is an enrolled citizen of the Cherokee Nation, tribe of Oklahoma. And this book has been, it's on Roxane Gay's book club. I was about to say book of the month club, but book club. It's getting wonderful attention from all different sectors of the literary world. And so we're really, really excited to be discussing it tonight. So I'm going to get out of the way and let y'all kick it off. But welcome and thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, Brandon. Shioni got up.
Yeah, how you doing, man?
All right, as y'all say in the West, OCO. Good to meet you. OCO. Yeah, so I wonder if you would like to just start off and read us a short passage so that folks who haven't gotten a chance to read the book yet can get a sense of some of the magic in the words that you were that you put together in this amazing book. And then we'll start off with some questions after that. If that
Great.
works. All right.
Yeah, this would be great. And thanks to everyone and to Charis Bookstore. Is it pronounced Charis or Charis?
Charis.
Charis. I'm sorry. But thank you for hosting me tonight, and I'm very grateful and happy to be here. I think I'll start right at the beginning with the prologue. It's just a few pages long. And I think it provides some context to the overall book. Ray Echota, September 5th, Qua, Oklahoma. The day before he died, in the remote town of Qua, Oklahoma, Ray Echota rode his motorcycle down the empty stretch of highway, blowing past rain puddles and trees, a strong wind pressing against his body. He was 15 years old. Workers along the side of the road wore orange vests and white hard hats. They didn't pay any attention to him as he flew past them, hunched forward, working the throttle. He rode for the pureness of the thrill and for the isolation of riding alone in an area where few police officers ever patrolled. Clouds hung low and pale before him as he rode home, past fields and old buildings, heading east into the hills, landscape and sky blending into the horizon. That night, he did impersonations at home to entertain his parents, while Ernest and Maria watched their police drama on TV. Ray Ray staggered into the living room, wearing dark sunglasses and waving a cane around, pretending he was blind. He stood in front of them, blocking their view of the TV, and spoke in his best French accent. Care to help an old man, monsieur? I am in need of assistance. Funny, Maria said. Isn't he funny, Ernest? I'm trying to watch my show, Ernest said. But monsieur, Ray Ray said. Ernest leaned forward and watched Ray Ray as he removed his sunglasses and went through his usual impersonations. Pee Wee Herman, Marlon Brando's Vito Corleone, even Ernest's friend Otto, who told old Cherokee stories drunk. Listen, Chooch, Ray said in Otto's low, drunken voice. He pretended to smoke an imaginary cigarette. You know the story of Chala, who was killed for refusing to leave the land? Let's go get another whiskey. Not bad, Ernest said. We'll probably see him tomorrow at the Cherokee National Holiday. The following day, September 6th, marked the anniversary of the 1839 signing of the Constitution of the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma. Ernest spoke with an unfamiliar excitement in his voice about the date's importance. This is a very important day for all of us since it marks the trail, so we should honor it. September 6th usually fell close to Labor Day weekend and brought people from all over the country to Oklahoma. The Echotas planned to spend the entire weekend watching stickball games, attending powwows, pageants, and art shows. Outside, a storm was heading west instead of east. A soft rain pattered against the window, the beginning of a thunderstorm. The night was cool and dry. The house smelled of fried catfish from dinner, which they had eaten on TV trays there in the living room. Did you finish your homework? Maria asked Ray Ray. The paper is done. A+ with smiley face. I bid you all good night. Ave atque vale. What? It's Latin for hail and farewell. Ave atque vale. Sure, Maria said. Now go play with your little brother. Edgar, the youngest sibling, was sitting on a blanket playing quietly with Legos in the corner of the room, as he often did. Ray Ray limped over to him, dragging his leg like a wounded soldier, and collapsed. He began helping Edgar stack Legos together. When Ray Ray was younger, he had fallen out of the tree in their backyard, breaking his leg in 3 places. He spent a few days in the hospital, where he told the nurse he had learned to levitate like the false prophet Simon Magus. I flew up in the air 40, 50 feet and then fell, he said. That explains the broken leg. The nurse looked at Ernest and Maria, confused. My son has an active imagination, Ernest kept saying, which was true. Ray Ray was always carried with him a notebook in which he scribbled song lyrics and sketched strange creatures, beasts with fire shooting from their eyes and tongues hanging from their mouths, chubby old men with pig snouts instead of noses, and the mythic hawks who carried away babies. Ernest and Maria encouraged his artistry, his drawings and impersonations, and also loved how he enjoyed searching outside near the lake for animal bones, bird bones, and feathers to make necklaces. How he wore certain shirts he said were for healing. How he was fascinated by the sky and would go lie down and watch the stars at night. How he mowed lawns and cleaned roof gutters for 2 summers until he earned enough money to buy his own 250cc Nighthawk, the motorcycle he would ride to the mall in Tulsa on September 6th, the day he was shot by a police officer. Sonja, who was 16 and the eldest sibling, was eccentric in her own way too, retreating to her room every day after school and staying there all night, rarely coming out. Sensitive to the strange intimacy of family conversations, she preferred solitude. On this night, she was in her bedroom writing long letters to boys at school and listening to Joy Division. She would later wonder why she hadn't been in the living room, spending time with Ray Ray. If only I'd been a better sister, she often thought. The night of September 5th, his last night alive, Ray Ray lay next to his brother Edgar on the floor with the Legos. We should build a castle, he said. It could be beautiful, brother. I'm building a monster, Edgar told him excitedly. He held up his Lego creature and roared. Little brother, Ray Ray said, there are enough monsters in this world. And I'll stop there.
One sec. We got to bring Holiday back.
Okay. All right. That's fine.
There we go. Sorry, Holiday.
No problem.
There we go.
I'm good. All right.
Okay.
Yes.
There you are.
We're back.
I was just saying that opening scene was perhaps one of the most emotionally gentle scenes of the whole book. First of all, I found myself thinking about this book whenever it wasn't in my hand, which is super rare. I'll read books and I'll enjoy it, and then I'll just kind of forget until I'm like back into the place where I see the book and I pick it up. But this really stayed with me, and it was a little haunting, actually, which I think is an example of a great piece of art. And so, without giving it away for readers, saying that this was one of the most gentle scenes means that there's a lot of other scenes that were super excruciating. So I wanted to ask you, what else is removed? What the title "The Removed" obviously refers to the removal, also 1830s, also known as the Trail of Tears, Trail of Terror. What else is removed within this family besides that particular history?
Yeah. Thank you, Holiday. Well, the importance of that title relates, obviously, yes, to the Trail of Tears, but also how removed from each character is removed from something in some way. There's a brother, Edgar, who feels removed completely from this world, from this reality, and I place his sections of the book in what's called the Darkening Land, which from the old traditional Cherokee stories is this place that exists where people go after death until, and this is the important part, until justice is served. Right? And I always thought about that, how that place is mentioned in some of the old stories, and until justice is served, is justice ever really served? That becomes a big question I think about. So Edgar's removed, and I know that's very surreal, right? And in a way, I'm not, I am a very surreal writer, I think, in my fiction, and that's something I'm really interested in. And so his sections especially can come across as odd or surreal. But he's removed from reality, or from this world in certain ways. But I wanted it to feel like it wasn't too different from this world in terms of the racism that he is experiencing in his sections.
Right.
And then also the way that the family is in general just removed, feeling through their brokenness. Right, they're removed. They're trying to heal after this catastrophe, and their son Ray Ray has been shot by a police officer. 15 years. That's opening prologue I read. The rest of the book takes place 15 years later, present day, and they're still coping with the effects of the trauma of Ray Ray being removed from them,
right,
through the police officers, racial profiling, basically, shooting him, and And then there's a daughter, Sonja, who is in some ways removed from the family, and she's sort of pursuing this guy who, I don't want to sort of give it away. There's a very specific reason why she's pursuing him in a relationship. There's a foster kid that comes in who is removed from his home, and then so there's I wanted that theme of removal all throughout throughout the book.
Thank you for that. Yeah, what I was feeling, what was so excruciating for me as I was reading, specifically with the siblings, Edgar and Sonja, was how much they seemed to be removed from themselves, like from their gut instincts, from that internal voice, ancestral voice. And I was just like, please get away from these toxic white people. Oh my God. So nervous. God, I hope they make it out. I hope they make it out for each of them. And there was just like pages of you see them slowly awakening and slowly being like, maybe this isn't safe. Maybe I should leave, or maybe I should, Sonja's situation. And I was just thinking that one of the things I say in my mental health and spiritual wellness practice is that one of the most accessible decolonial things we can do is to take a radical pause, like to take a sacred breath, to come back to ourselves, to get back to our breath, to assess what's happening, to give ourselves choice, to act with agency, to respond versus react. Just that moment to come back, accessible. You don't have to spend money. You don't need any treaty. You don't need a tribal government. That little big thing is what I was like, oh, please come back to yourself, And so I appreciate hearing all the different ways that they were removed. And I took it in even the most sort of like organic of personal ways, of the way that trauma and colonialism and oppression separates us from ourselves, from like what we feel is right and what we believe to be safe, but we get gaslit by
absolutely. And I'm very interested as being a writer in creating art. That's one of my goals, right? And art, what art does is it unsettles us a lot. It can disturb us. It moves us in good ways, but also in ways that we're not sure of. And one of my goals in this was to jar the reader a little bit, shake the reader up.
You did.
Right. And not just through, story or scene, but through language as well. And this is what I think differentiates the book from like what contemporary fiction is doing. The Book of the Month Club, I think, labeled it as contemporary fiction, which I think readers sort of misunderstood. I think it's really literary fiction because what I'm trying to do is provide more than just a plot, right? There's that traditional plot that a story follows that most of us learned probably in high school, that when we're reading it in English, the rising action, climax, falling action. It also sounds very prurient, I always say, right? But it that doing away with plot so much and playing with language and structure and character and focusing on what Susan Sontag is a writer from the 60s and 70s. I can't remember when her essay was published that became a book, but she talked about the importance of literature affecting us, that we focus on how it makes us feel instead of trying to figure out
what's happening.
That makes sense. And so that was part of my aim is in this book was playing with language, using at times repetition, but also things with Cherokee language and here's just an example. Like, there's a part where, and Edgar has a drug problem in this book, and I use a fowl as a metaphor, basically, for his addiction. That he begins to see this fowl.
Oh, is that the metaphor? Oh,
yes, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, and it's weird because, I mean, I was thinking of it as a sort of metaphor because he keeps seeing this red fowl sort of following him. And I understand that's odd, right? But not just that it's serving as a metaphor for his addiction that's following him, but just the word itself, fowl, is different from, because of the consonants here. Fowl, it's like chicken. It's different than blue jay or dove, which, so in a way, like what a poet does, focusing on that was part of my aim in this focusing on language, word choice, and repetition also, so all that, I sort of put into a blender and, played with, to create this sort of like I wanted to create this kaleidoscope, looking through different lenses in a structured way. My editor helped me, but I think, art is, I remember reading one time that good literature, or which is to say good art, disturbs the comfortable and comforts the disturbed, right? And so and I've always kind of thought about that when I work.
I mean, I think a reader who's used to a linear plot and linear time, experiencing time in a linear way, that the book would give it such a reader cause for discomfort because of the kaleidoscopic nature that you just spoke of. And it does mess with time a little bit. I mean, it does follow some chronology, but the splicing of Sala's stories and in the actual Trail of Tears accounts, really, and then some of the visions that different family members have, it really does play around with like time as a spiral versus a linear line, which I really appreciate. And it also kind of like shakes up, like, wait, where are we? What's happening? What's reality? What's vision? Is there actually a difference even? If you want to say anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's important to think about, because my last book, Where the Dead Sit Talking, followed a really kind of traditional linear timeline. It was a man looking back and saying, here's the time from A to B, where I was in foster care as a teenager, right? And it follows that specific timeline. Yeah, here I'm doing different things, even though the present day story follows basically a week. There's also Chala speaking as a sort of ancestral spirit, and he's kind of going back and forth. And so I'm interested in doing different things, with different. So I knew that I wanted this book to be different than my last one, and so it requires maybe a little bit more of the reader to sort of, for some work maybe, but I'm the type of reader that I don't mind putting in, extra thought and work, so I'm, linear, any kind of linear narrative, and also, having multiple narrators, is, can be, can feel very sort of jumping around. And I know that's, that can be confusing maybe for some, but I felt like I really wanted to write about this family.
Yeah. What would you say is there a message around healing and forgiveness in there. I'm thinking about, the mother confronting the police officer that killed her baby, which I think we've said that enough. That's not giving too much away. And a particular line she said in that confrontation, in that confronting of the officer, but also just in general, the proximity of the children, the adult children, to some of the toxic white people. It made me think that there's something there, like there's something to be had there around, like, one path of healing is like forgiveness, and that's actually for us, not for, whoever the oppressive body is. So I was just wondering thoughts about that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a scene where Maria confronts the police officer, and throughout the whole book, what she's struggling with is how does she, for many years, how do you confront the person who killed your baby, killed your son? Is that something we can ever really heal from? Is it something that we're able to forgive someone for doing that to us? So those are the two big questions that, when she comes to that confrontation and sees, part of it too is, the police officer is in a state of health that's not, what he once was, and requires an in-care nursing. And so I was thinking also about how much empathy she has for him, because at one point she says, I have always thought that she thinks, I've always thought that she would begin hitting him, once she and so a big part of that, not just that scene, but the whole idea of, I started writing this book because I was reading articles about violence against natives, and especially violence against Native teenagers. There were a few teenage boys who had gotten shot and killed, and weren't getting national attention, and it really, really bothered me. And not to take in any way am I, with this book, trying to take away from violence against any people of color. I was just reading specifically, this book was written before, all the national attention we got last summer, and George Floyd and so forth. And so, it'd been done, and not to take away from that, but I was thinking specifically the Native Lives Movement began, really after one teenager was shot and killed. And one thing I feel is important that I wanted to point out was that a lot of these articles blamed the kid for having mental issues, and rather than, just, I mean, I don't know the kids, but it seems, very bothersome to me that the article just sort of went into this direction. The articles went in this direction of mental illness, and that our teenagers are not getting enough help for their mental illness.
Wow.
And so I wonder, but what if they weren't mentally ill? I don't know that they're, and so, and even if they were having mental issues, they don't need to lose their life for it, right?
Absolutely.
So all those, that's what really started me in pursuing this novel, where those are some very big, difficult questions. And I wanted to approach them not in a preachy way, and not in not in a, I didn't want to write a book of nonfiction. I wanted to do it in an artful way, because I think as fiction writers, and I'm sorry I'm rambling.
No, you're fine.
I think as fiction writers, or as artists, we take a topic or we take things and then try to present them in a new, fresh way, right? And see what sort of discussions raise, from them. And so, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Sweet. I'm actually glad you brought up police violence against Native people. Let's see, how do I want to turn this corner? I was grateful to be a part of, I do Black and Indigenous healing and power building work, personal level, community level. And I was able to be in the Bay Area with a group of youth, Black and Indigenous youth, who were doing some work around all of these topics. And they found out that in the same subway station that Oscar Grant was killed in Oakland in the BART, a year earlier, a Native young man, Andrew, I'm blanking on his last name now, was also killed, same spot. And so, and actually he was like the grandson of one of the original AIM members. So we did this like altar building ceremony, and we did this healing ceremony at the Fruitvale station where it happened. And anyway, all to say that like that was the first time I was able to do that type of stuff with young people. And most of the conversations around this are with adults as well as elders. And so I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts around? And you also mentioned last some of the gifts of, if there were gifts of the quarantine, and I know we're still in it, but of 2020 in particular, I believe is the rise in visibility of Indigenous lives as well as Black and Indigenous people, and then that whole conversation around healing from mutual harms, and then also power building for collective good. So I wanted to ask your thoughts about that. And then in particular, I know the Cherokee Nation has difficult history with Black folks. Just for folks you and I probably know as Cherokee people, but for folks on the call, I just want to share a few things and then circle around to my question. So I wanted to share that before the removal, when Cherokee folks were in where we are in Georgia, a little bit further north than Atlanta, but also in Tennessee and North Carolina and the Smoky Mountains. That's our original homelands. And by 1861, Cherokee folks held 4,000 Black enslaved folks. And this was with more than 7% of Cherokee families owning enslaved Black people. This was a higher percentage than was generally across the South, where 5% of families owned enslaved Black folks. Later, Principal Chief John Ross and the Cherokee Council signed a treaty to join the Confederacy, and they actually joined with the other 5 southeastern nations, Choctaw, Seminole, Creek, and Chickasaw, in establishing a pro-Confederate alliance. And then, of course, after removal, it took the Black freedmen, who were the enslaved people of Cherokee, who went with them, as well as the children of those folks. They were not granted Cherokee citizenship until just 2017. And so, our folks have a lot of healing work to do, and that's just one side of the story, right? There's we could talk about how the U.S. government used recently unenslaved Black folks as buffalo soldiers to go colonize the West. So both of these groups have been pitted against each other, as well as there's examples of us working together. But I wanted to ask any of your thoughts about any of this, and if any of these histories might make a book sometime.
It's absolutely. I think it would make that someone should write about it. It's also difficult to think about, and so much of our ancestry and history is not taught, This stuff is not taught. And the more people I meet from West Coast and East Coast who tell me, well, we weren't really, it was just sort of glossed over, or sort of mentioned, there was this little thing called removal, and it's sort of like when they teach slavery, how I've had people tell me, I remember in American history, and we didn't really go into anything, right? They're just going through the chapter, and then so I think what I think over the past year is that more people than ever are paying attention, which and providing some hope that I think we'll start to see more conversations, more books and more art forms going into the history and exploring it. And I know that and I teach it, which you should come out to IAIA in Santa Fe sometime. You would be great there to do a workshop or something, and but a lot of the students there, and they even First Nations up in Canada, right? Which I don't know nearly as much about First Nations, but it's such a fascinating place because we all sort of we're there for, and this is in the MFA program, we're there for an entire week, twice a year, and are able to really sort of get to know each other and engage in all day long, and then into the night, and then these conversations and listening and learning, and it's fascinating to me how many Native artists are out there, in not just writers, but in visual. IAIA has a fantastic program, doing visual art and film and stuff, and and they're just ready to get their work out. And I feel like Hollywood is always done just such a horrible job at portraying natives, and you know what I mean. They've really been absolutely horrible, and the people around Hollywood too. I mean, thinking about going back when Marlon Brando refused the Academy, the Oscar, and sent Sachin. What's her name? Sachin. I can't think of her last name. To decline the award because of the AIM, the American Indian movement, and all that was going on in the early 70s. And getting booed. She was just getting booed from Hollywood. It's all, to think that, we've made some progress there, but at the same time, there's so much more that needs to be written about. And I hope that, I hear people all the time when I've, and talking about the last book, going around and reading that they are just so eager to learn more about the history. And there's so much division and so many different aspects to it, as you mentioned, that haven't been really unpacked yet. And it seems to me in art, especially, or at least beyond the regional, beyond the regional areas, and I'm excited because I'm hopeful, that Sterling Harjo is a friend of mine, and he's a filmmaker from Oklahoma and Tulsa there, and he got he's making this FX series called Reservation Dogs with and I can't think of the other director's name, the guy that won the Academy Award. But anyway, so I think, especially over the past year or two, well, maybe probably since 2016, we've actually started to see a lot more, movement and interest on a much wider scale. So I think, I'm going to continue, writing about the best that I can. But what about, if it's okay, can I ask you, what are you working on? Anything specific along those lines, or is it?
It's a good question. Yeah. So let's see. So I have some curriculum that I do for like universities about sort of like respective and shared histories, bringing people into the conversation of some of these histories that are not talked about, and not just with Cherokee Nation, but John Horse and Chief Osceola, how they banded together against the colonizers of the Seminoles, and there's just so many, so-called, Black people discovered the North Pole. No, Jim Hint. What's his name? Last name Henson. I can't remember his first name. And the Black Inuits who have come back down and been like, actually, let's rename this history. Yeah. But there's so many stories, and so there's curriculum. There's a lot of just like little networks of groups I'm in where we have these like iterative conversations, slowly doing that relationship building and healing work. And at conferences, they're like at Protecting Mother Earth conference, and other sort of conferences where folks are coming together. But as like a project, it's interesting. I might have something more concrete. Social media. Have filed divorce papers with social media. I'm still like in touch, and so I feel like there's just so many folks popping up that are just Instagrammers who are just speaking or tweeting their thoughts about their personal experiences, walking in both the world of being part of the people who were the original keepers of the land and being part of the people who were brought here to work the land. That is such a unique, if you're either, and then if you're both, and then just the conversation between both, I really feel like there's so much for our collective liberation in those conversations around what does it mean to be sovereign? What is, I feel like complicating representation politics, complicating, self-determination and sovereignty politics. There's just so much for those two groups to learn from each other. So yeah, that's what I got.
And also, the thought of Santine Frazier and I were talking about this the other night. It was part of it is, some of my, when I'm working on something like this book, and I think, can I do this? Or sometimes I'm like, that a lot of people face, like thinking, am I native enough to talk about this? Which comes entirely out of that problem of colonialization, right? Yeah. That colonial thought that feels so paralyzing to us, and that big question, which is are we native enough to talk about this? Am I just able to talk about these things, right? All comes out of that, I think, that thought. And yes, and that's what I think a lot of people struggle with, certainly.
It's so unfortunate that, again, another similarity between indigenous folks and folks of African descent is the only two groups that have to prove and have a whole legal, political conversation around what they are. And also, of course, determined by blood, whether that be the one drop rule or blood quantum. We're the only two groups, our Asian siblings, our Asian relatives are never like who's really Korean here?
Right, right. I know. Yeah, the whole blood. Yeah.
Like identity politics around belonging in every group of color, but not like ours,
Right.
So
Right. And people, I was just gonna say, people always are saying that, how much are you?
Yep.
Right. How much, and a lot of that, I mean, I blame it all on, again, colonial thought, and I wanted to write a post-colonial novel that addresses these things, and so yeah.
Yeah, I have one more question for you, and then we'll see if the audience has any. I wanted to ask, it's about format and platform. Yes, so there are so many with technology, so many platforms now. I'm curious, do you aim to continue to write standard, traditional, amazing books like this, or would you venture into graphic novels, audio books that you read yourself, which I think is different than someone else? At least the ones I've heard with the author themselves reading, I experienced them completely different, even if I've read it myself. So that, and then any other sort of like medium that maybe I didn't say.
Well, genre-wise, I've started writing a middle grade book.
Even
younger. Like I think 9 to 12, right? Like middle. With that with Cherokee characters. So I'm not sure. It's so early yet. I'm only just playing with it, but that that's a totally different genre. And so I'm going to try at least one of those. I would probably do a graphic novel if someone, if my agent or something came to me and said, hey, this is, something that you should do. And this, it hasn't really, a graphic novel hasn't really, I haven't thought about too much, but I'm always just thinking traditional, I write more traditional sort of, well, I don't want to say traditional because I feel like it doesn't follow traditional, narrative, but narrative art. But and I like to experiment and do different things within the context of the novel or the short story. And I've always been like that, but I would not be opposed to it at all. In fact, my agent's the one that recommended, the middle grade genre.
Teen book, nice.
Yeah, so we'll see.
We need a Judy Blume.
Yeah, I don't know about if
no pressure.
Yeah, that's it. And would likely be way weirder, than Judy Blume,
That's right.
So you're right. Yeah.
I love middle grade and young adult books. I still read them. So you won't just have youth audiences, I think.
Yeah, I hope not. I mean, I hope it would be, we'll see. Again, I'm just sort of starting out on it, and we'll see what comes of it. But hopefully.
Yeah, the talking leaves. I love it. Sweet. Well, let's see if there's any questions here. Looking like folks are shy.
Holiday, I popped some questions in the ask a question area, and I think we got some. So just pop.
All right.
Open that.
I see. Thank you. Sweet. All right. We've got there were aspects of the structure of this book that reminded me of Faulkner's As I Lay Dying. Can you talk about your literacy influences on your style and structure?
Yeah, that's a very good. Thank you for that, because in a way, when I was immediately thinking about writing from different voices, As I Lay Dying came to mind, right? And as someone who, thank you for that question. but I don't know that Faulkner is an influence on my style so much. I know that I hope that I don't fall into one category of style. Often we see Faulkner that has sentences that go on for pages, which are, a couple of pages, and certainly, I did not do that. If anything, I really sort of tried to, have a much more minimalist style with this book. And I was focusing almost more on word level than line level. So I was really trying to be, as conscious as I could of language, but certainly Jesmyn Ward's Sing Unburied Sing, it kind of comes out of these different voices also, and I thought a little bit about that book when I was starting out. Louise Erdrich is a big influence on me. Four Souls, and Love Medicine, and those books that have different voices. So I think those were probably influenced this book. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Next question is, which character's voice came to you first, or who did you write first?
I believe I wrote Edgar's first.
Uh-huh.
And there's I believe I wrote each one separately, each third separately, but at some point I was halfway through one, and I knew to begin I would begin the other one and just sort of play it that way. But I think I started Edgar's first because I had this image of him sitting in a motel room in very bad shape, right, and wanting to commit suicide. There's a great Polish writer named Konwicki, Konwicki, I believe, has a very surreal novel out of Poland from the 60s, I think, called A Dream Book for Our Time. And that was a little bit of an influence on Edgar's section, because that's the character in that book sort of commits suicide and finds himself in this sort of very strange world. And but that was probably where I started, was with Edgar's. And let me just clarify this, because I know there are other questions, but I was beginning with the questions, right, of police violence and everything, but I oddly wasn't sure how to. I didn't know when I wanted to start the book. Like, did I want to start it just days after the shooting with the family or what? But I knew I wanted to write from the siblings, so I started with Edgar, if that makes sense. Uh-huh. And then all the work comes in after you've drafted everything, and then my editor, certainly my agent, helped me with structure, and then my editor helped me with structure too. So
yeah. Okay, sweet. Question is, are you a plotter or a discoverer?
Definitely a discoverer, not a plotter at all.
Explain the difference.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the way I see the difference, and I mean, I think if you plot something, it would be more like an outline, and following the traditional, knowing these are the conflicts or the problems that we're going to work through, and then resolve them at the end. I don't think so much about that as I do about language and imagery. I think in terms of scenes. Mm-hmm. And I think I know where I want to be at the end, but it doesn't always end there, right? I mean, I think I feel strongly for those people who are out there writing is really discovering the pleasure that you can get from fiction writing. And I talk about this with my students a lot. What's the pleasure that gives you fiction writing, right? and in the beginning, that's the most fun because you're just sort of drafting, and these scenes come out so, they're so dreamlike, and they can be messy, The writer Don DeLillo described in his book Mao Tu as fiction writing being like taking care of a baby. And that at the beginning, when you first get a baby, right, they're messy, they're drooling, they're sloppy, they're just, and then soon, the more you care for them, the more you care for the baby, pretty soon, they're able to sit up by themselves, they're able to walk, they're able to develop language, and then soon they become this perfect little being, right, due to your care.
Yeah.
And I think that's a brilliant metaphor for fiction writing, because at the beginning it's that messy, and then but the more you sort of work on it, the more beautiful it becomes. So I think it all comes through discovery. And at some point when the work comes in, you can sort of work on the plot elements a little bit more in revision.
I so appreciate hearing that. That's so inspiring. And even just something you said earlier about like thinking you were focused on how it would feel, or maybe something about how the reader feels. Either way, it reminds me of what in somatics we call embodied reading, which is to like center with yourself before you open the book. And as you're reading it, just kind of you like go with the story, but kind of come back to yourself and see how am I feeling? What am I picking up on my own self based on this text? And as a way to really like embody the reading versus like keeping it in your head and being separated. And it just sounds like such a holistic way to take something in.
It is, and you can look it up, Susan.
To love your book more, the last thing, because before doing embodied reading, if I felt bad reading text, I would like, I don't want to pick this up. It makes me feel bad. But with this, even though it was, like I said, I was terrified in different points. I was very disturbed. I was sad. I just recognized it as a feeling of many feelings, and then I could keep going. So, yeah.
And Susan Sontag is I can't think of the name of, but you could find it. You can find it online. I think the essay, it's a beautiful essay. And I used to do that with students when I would teach poetry, like with high school or middle school, or sometimes in the introductory creative writing classes. If we're reading poetry and a student comes away saying, a lot of times students are too afraid to say, I don't know what it means, because they're afraid it reflects badly on them as a reader, or and I always tell them it's okay. Let's start with, we don't know. Let's focus on something else, which is, how did you feel when you read it, right? Were you angry? Right? I mean, because it's like, this made me really angry. Or it made me really sad. What was it that made you sad? And then we can kind of unpack it that way based on how we feel, and start there. And I think especially when you're talking about art as abstract as poetry, or as abstract as poetry can be. Certainly fiction too, but
for sure. Appreciate that. Just got two more questions for you. Okay. How can we find out more about stops on the book tour?
What I don't have it on my webpage, actually. That's where is it posted? Oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. I don't have it on my webpage, but I tweet them out a lot, and also well ahead of time. But I can also tell you right now some of the other events that I have coming up. Like Tuesday night, I have a big pen event with Rebecca Mackay, who is a National Book Award finalist with me a few years ago, and also she went on to be a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, and for her book The Great Believers, which is set in about the AIDS epidemic in the 80s, and also set in Paris. Big book, in 2018. But she and I are going to be talking about this book on Tuesday night. Let's see what else. I
feel like I saw a list of other readings, maybe on Charis's site, because I saw this one and I saw a bunch of others that you're on.
Yeah, I think Echo, my publisher, they tweet it out and they post it sometimes. Echo, HarperCollins. But yeah, I'm also doing Roxane Gay's Audacious Book Club in March, which I'm excited about. Yeah, at Harvard, I'm doing in April 14th. Harvard, their native program is hosting me, so I'm excited about that. So yeah, I have. I need to get that up on my website, though. I apologize, I don't have that posted on there, but I will do that. Thank you for the reminder.
For sure. Last question here is, excuse me, was there anything you cut from the book that you were sad to edit out, even if you knew it was the right move? Oof, prioritizing.
Yes. Yes, very good question. And I was very sad that a lot of Chala's sections were cut.
Oh, really?
A lot more. I had a lot more stories, some of the old traditional stories. And a lot of it, just was a little bit too much, felt like they were too much of a digression, the stories, because some of them, didn't really pertain to healing or forgiveness as much. And I really wanted a space in this book for those old stories, which were documented by a man named James Mooney. In a book called Myths of the Cherokee, the stories that arrived orally, right, and were documented by him, and I love those stories, and they're so fascinating. And I wanted again, if we say in an artful way, I wanted to present them in this book, while I talked about this historical, the historical trail and the events. So I, a lot of them just, I think, felt a little bit heavy-handed and a little bit too long and probably long-winded, probably for this book. I mean, if this were a 500-page book, if this were a really big novel, I probably could have gotten away with having a lot more of that in there, but more of those stories. But it's really not a very long book. It's 70,000 words or something. It's 280 pages or something. It's it's relatively short. So
yeah, that makes sense. I personally loved reading so many of the stories that I've only heard. So yeah, that was bringing that to print. Well, that's the end of our audience questions. Ginormous Ski Wadon, thank you so much. Do you have any final things you'd like to say?
I don't think so. I hope that readers just come to it with a very open mind, right? And recognize that. I mean, I'm trying to do. I'm trying to focus on language, and that it, in a way, plot becomes a little bit sidelined because I'm doing some other things, and part of that is to not only raise discussions and conversations with people, but to get them to hopefully feel a sense of empathy toward violence against natives and what kind of healing and is involved with that.
Yeah.
I want to thank you both for such a beautiful discussion. I really love this book, Brandon. So thank you for bringing it into the world. I think I think a lot of people are going to connect with it across a lot of reading tastes and identities. I think people are going to find its way to many different folks. So I'm really honored that we got to host you, and Holiday, I'm always grateful to you for bringing depth of thought and feeling to every conversation you're a part of. So